son of a bitch.
Groovy.
Hey everybody, this is Matthew Movies coming at you with my review of Final Destination, the 2000 horror film that I think is freaking fantastic. It started off a franchise of films, some of which are not all that great, but at the same time, I feel like it is actually somewhat underrated, which may seem hard to believe because it did start off a whole franchise, but I think some people think of these movies as a whole, and some of them aren't as good as the others, but the original movie I thought was much more creative and fun and entertaining and awesome, and has a lot of moments that have stuck with me for years. For those of you who aren't aware of this movie and don't know what it's about, essentially it stars a character played by Devon Sawa, and he goes on a plane for a field trip with a bunch of his classmates, and he all of a sudden gets this vision of the plane taking off and then exploding, and he starts freaking out because he feels like it's real, because some of the things when he wakes up that he's seeing are how they played out in his dream. So he feels like it's this kind of prophetic vision, starts freaking out that he needs to get off the plane because he knows he's going to die, and as a result some of the other people on the plane kind of start trying to stop him, so he gets dragged off, they get dragged off, and they're really mad at him because they're missing out on this fantastic opportunity to go on this dream field trip. And then you see, as two of them are fighting, you see the plane take off in the background and blow up, and sure enough, he was right and he saved all of their lives. But this is a horror film, so it's not, it's not going to end super quick like that, and it's not going to have all happiness like everybody is like, oh, thank you so much, buddy, you did it. There's got to be some tension and some fear going forward. So as the movie progresses, you find out that all the people that were able to get off the plane one by one start dying, and they figure out that it is in a specific order that was based on where they were on the plane and how they would have died if they had actually been in the crash. So the explosion happened at the front of the plane, so the person who was closest to the front dies first, and so on and so on until they get to the last, and they all die in very elaborate ways, and that's the core concept. And this movie, the work plays on that to perfection. I mean, when you talk about the actual characters in this movie, I will say that to me is one of the bigger flaws in the movie. I think Devon Sawa is pretty good in it. He does a great job, especially in that opening moment where he's very fearful for his life, and he's trying to get off that plane, and he's desperate, and you can really feel that palpable just terror in his performance in that moment, that he's gonna do anything he has to in order to be getting off that plane, and because it is the jumping off point of the entire movie. If he hadn't done a very good job in that moment, it would have been very detrimental to the rest of the film. And he is the protagonist of the film, and throughout the rest of the movie you are rooting for him. He's good, but he's not great. Ali Larter is the next biggest character in this movie, and for me, I think she does a pretty bad job in this movie, to be honest. I feel like she kind of feels like she's sleepwalking throughout most of the movie, and she's been good in other things, but she just she kind of takes things in a little bit too much stride. And there's this whole kind of storyline where her and Devon Sawa's character kind of get romantically linked, and to me there's almost no chemistry between the two of them, and I thought she was one of the bigger flaws of this movie, and she is in a subsequent movie, and she actually does a much better job in that. For me, like the biggest thing about her character to me is that she just, there are moments where she's very much afraid and all that kind of stuff, but throughout the rest of it, she seems to be very non-committal to her performance, and it's one of the bigger flaws, because she is one of the biggest characters. You have Kerr Smith, who is basically the jerk of the survivors. He's the guy who was fighting with Devon Sawa before the explosion, and he's, of all the survivors, he's the one that you care the least about, for sure. You're perfectly okay with the idea of him dying in some regards, and I mean, he has a girl that is involved with in a lot of the scenes, and she survives as well, and she's fairly forgettable, except for the way in which she is dispatched. And Sean William Scott has a supporting role in this as well as one of the kids, and this is this was before he became, like, this was filmed before he became Stifler, so he is kind of in the background, but he's very, very entertaining. I mean, his reactions to things, his facial expressions are pretty hilarious, and it does work because it kind of takes a little bit of the edge off in a couple moments where they are kind of needed, but at the same time, you know, he isn't all that important either. So I thought his performance really worked for the film. And Tony Todd, the guy who I'll always think of as Candyman, has a cameo in it. He was also in the Night of the Living Dead remake. He's a horror legend, and he has this cameo where he's kind of explained the concept that, you know, death is coming for them because it felt cheated by the fact that they survived, and having him there and that kind of deep, gravelly voice of his imparting this wisdom is just such a key part of why this movie works, because he really makes you kind of invest in it, and when you see him, you're like, ha, Tony Todd, awesome. And to me, one of the major reasons why this movie works is the way in which they handle the deaths. I mean, this movie has one of the coolest endings of a horror film of the genre, of the time period for sure, and maybe of all time. I mean, it's just such an effective kind of end point to the movie, and it's funny because if you actually have the DVD, there's an alternative ending that I think would have sucked. And so it was so cool that they shot it the way they did, and apparently it was based on feedback from audiences that they did tests on. And a lot of times you can see these test audiences, they give really goofy feedback, but in this case they were 100% right to have them change it. And I think the way that they meant was freaking fantastic. And I love the deaths in this movie. I mean, they're so vastly different from one another in some ways. I mean, you have some characters that are killed so quickly and out of nowhere, and it takes you by complete surprise. It's kind of the jump scare element of the movie, and every time it happens, you're like, oh man! And even after you've seen the movie the first time and you go back to rewatch it, and you know what's coming, every time it's kind of like, whoo, man, that was sweet. And then you have other characters that have these needlessly elaborate deaths where, like, you know, they're living their lives, and all of a sudden they set up these basically like the Rube Goldberg almost-esque machine ways of dying, where, like, you know, they hit one thing and it causes a bunch of other things to happen that end up killing them, and in these kind of needlessly elaborate but entertaining fashion. So you have this very severe dichotomy in the fashion in which they kill these characters that I think really makes it work, because you come to expect these elaborate deaths, and then you get a very quick death, and then you come to expect a quick death, you get elaborate death, and kind of play off one another in a very interesting way. That I like this movie a great deal. I think it's fan-freaking-tastic. So those are my thoughts on Final Destination. Let me know in the comment section below what you think, if you're a fan of it, if you feel like people don't give it enough respect because of the sequels, whatever. Other than that, please hit that like button, hit that share button. It makes it much more likely that other people will come check out this review and let me know what they think, which would be awesome, because I love talking to people about films. Speaking of which, if you are new here or you just haven't done it yet, please hit subscribe, hit that notification bell. That way you can find out when I put out a new video and come and let me know what you think. Aside from all that though, have yourself a good day.